Welcome back to Failing Forward. We've got another great episode for you guys today about driving. We're going to talk about the good and the bad of full self-driving. We're going to perform an analysis of public transportation and explain how we got to car-centric cities. And finally, we're going to close with a discussion on driving exams and whether or not it is too easy to become a driver in America. Enjoy. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Failing Forward, the show where we analyze personal and professional stories about failure, because here we believe that you need to learn how to fail in order to succeed. I'm Harris. I'm joined by my co-host, Nick, and today we've got a very special episode. We've got a special guest, Gabriel Wehrle, on the show today. He's a software engineer who lived in New Jersey, which will be very relevant for the topic we're going to discuss, which is driving and self-driving and a few other concepts that I want to talk about from there. So I kind of wanted to kick this podcast off by talking about a very interesting article that kind of came up in my feed a couple of days ago. And it's about Tesla and its full self-driving beta. So are both of you already familiar with the full self-driving beta and that program and everything?
Mm-hmm. I'm not familiar enough, but I already disagree with it. You should probably explain
it. So for people who are listening who are not super familiar, years and years ago when Tesla first came out, they had, of course, the electric vehicle, and they're going to change the game with electric cars and all that. And one of the bigger things they promised was full self-driving. And they wanted to have an AI drive the car, and you could just take a nap, and the car would take you from point A to point B, and it would be glorious, and it would be the future, and it would be incredible, and all of that. Tesla is notorious for over-promising and not delivering, and then going, behind schedule and being under budget or over budget, and catastrophically failing. So I think it took over a decade for any of this stuff to really mature. And then I think like 5 years ago or something, they finally started doing self-driving, and you pay like $10,000, and then monthly you can access this self-driving beta. And the news report that came out a couple of days ago is that in the latest version of the full self-driving beta, they replaced 300,000 lines of C++ code with an end-to-end neural network. And Gabe, I know that the number immediately annoys you, right?
What? Yeah, I think it's like a bad metric. Like, what exactly are you trying to say when you say, oh yeah, we've replaced, N lines of code with this, language model or whatever it is?
Yeah, a bad coder can write a simple function in like 100 lines when it could take 10. Right. You have no idea how good the coders were who made all of that, so...
Yeah, exactly. Or you could do the opposite, and like, I could take my entire code base and put it on one line.
Yeah, you could make it all one line.
Yeah. Did all these features in one line of code.
Yeah, right. 300,000 just sounds good, but like, how many like megabytes or gigabytes of code storage space on the computer of the car did it save? I feel like that would be cool to hear, because the neural network's probably actually bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting point.
Now, what do you think a layman would think if they saw it? Someone who's not as familiar with programming and they just see this headline. They would probably be like, that sounds pretty impressive, right? Like they replaced a huge chunk of their code base with this AI.
Dang. Like, if my mom was on the podcast, we could ask her. Shout out to my mom. Love you, Mom. Second shout out.
Yeah.
I agree with you. You're right.
Yeah, but I read this headline, and my question, which I was kind of surprised neither of you guys asked, was, what was the 300,000 lines of code that got replaced?
That's also true. Yeah.
Yeah. I completely go with your argument, though, of that it's a meaningless headline, because of course you can say that for just about any like single line reduction or anything, right? Also, the number 300,000 is suspiciously rounded off,
Well, they gotta round it off for a headline. You can't say 301,012 lines of code.
Oh, but I'd believe it way more if that's what they say. I want them to open VS Code and give me the line count of their program. But anyways.
Yeah, okay. We'll move on. I'll let you move on because we can just rag on that one headline so much.
That's it. That's the podcast,
Yeah.
But yeah, so the what, right? So there are kind of, I guess, to really dumb it down, there's kind of two ways to approach this self-driving problem, right? One is to go ahead and hard code in these rules for driving, right? Like, oh, a red light, you got to stop. Like a yield, you got to kind of stop, you got to check, and then you got to go, all that stuff. You just hard coded it, just a bunch of if-else statements and everything. The other way to do it is to watch millions and millions of video clips of people driving and figure it out based off of that. And then by the end, you hope that after seeing that many clips, you kind of know how to drive, right? Mm-hmm. And what they did before was they kind of had a mix where they had a bunch of hard-coded rules, like they use like a Monte Carlo simulation and a few other things to kind of determine, whether to stop, whether to go, and that kind of stuff. And they would have rules in there, like a red light means stop and that kind of stuff. And then the more natural feeling kind of stuff, like when you merge speeding up instead of like coming to a stop, that would kind of be gained more and more with the neural network. So what they did in this full self-driving beta is they got rid of the Monte Carlo simulation, they got rid of some other hard-coded stuff, they ripped all of it out, and they had a neural network learn all of these rules. And I'm very much like on, the forefront of AI, and I'm very much like, I think it's a good thing. I mean, it's not perfect, but I think it'll get better. But I'm very nervous reading this headline because I think they are kind of asking for way more crashes and way more issues to happen in the future. Like this seems like a dangerous Pandora's box is trying to open into the world of driving. Especially because people don't consent into this, right? And I was kind of curious what you guys thought of that idea where, they're running this full self-driving beta and they're going to the streets and they're driving it around and they've opted into it and signed a waiver. But the people in the street and the other driver have not, right?
Good point. I'll let you start, Gabe. Do you have something to say?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind is like this all kind of goes back to how all this is advertised. I mean, like in the name alone, it's called full self-driving, which, I mean, to be blunt, is a lie. Like it's very impressive technology, absolutely, and it can drive on its own in a lot of situations without any human intervention, right? But there's still like a lot of situations, in which it behaves in unexpected ways or, doesn't know what to do and stops, etc. Right? And but they advertise it as full self-driving, giving people the, misunderstanding that, oh, if this thing is full self-driving, then I can just sit there and let it do its thing, right? And they're not really fully supervising it to the extent that they should be. And it's kind of interesting. I think, Harris, this was what you had linked. And this is good. From, do you want to go ahead and...
To both of those points, I'm looking at their actual FSD beta description. Yeah. And
FSD means full self-driving. Just want to clarify that.
Thank you. But yeah, it's attempts to drive to your destination by following curves in the road, stopping at and negotiating intersections, making left and right turns, navigating roundabouts, entering, exiting highways. You can use it on any kind of roadway, residential, city streets, works in a variety of driving scenarios. It says it uses the input from the cameras to do all of this stuff. But then it also says in bold, it does not make it autonomous and it requires a fully attentive driver.
Okay.
But I mean,
the
even
lawyers
with that
wanted to put that there.
I read the rest of it and I'm like, oh, I could just kind of, zone out and go from point A to point B and, it'll be fine because it knows what it's doing and it's reasoning about it. And Gabe, your car has the assisted cruise control, right?
Yeah, so it's got the what is that? Adaptive cruise control, where it can see the car in front, and then it's got self-steering, so it can see the lane markers and steer in the lane.
That stuff's really
so
nice.
Yeah, if you activate both of those on the highway, it effectively drives itself. But Harris, you've been in the driver's seat with this activated, so you can definitely speak to it's not 100%, like far from it.
No, it's like the first 3 hours of using it are terrifying because, you're not really used to the wheel turning on its own and it making decisions and that kind of stuff. And then I won't lie, once you get into like the 4th and the 5th hour, you kind of grow very like comfortable with it. And you're like, oh, it can handle this stuff. And then the biggest thing that I noticed, which I think you said is fixed now, but it used to be that when you were driving and then like an exit would come on the right, it would keep veering to the right like it was taking the exit because there's no line when that exit starts, so it can't differentiate where the lane starts and ends. And so you kind of got to yank the wheel back to the left and kind of continue driving. And then that's the reality check moment where you're like, oh, I should not keep this unattended.
Yeah. Nice.
But, and not to equate that with like what full FSD can do, because it's I mean, it's like leaps and bounds better than that. But
yeah, it sounds like. So wait, you don't have a Tesla, right? Okay, so it's something on another car, but that I agree with you. FSD like knows where you're going, so it has more information. It knows kind of what you're trying to do, whereas the one with the lane and the staying in front of it, behind the car in front of you, that one its only objective is to stay in the lane and not hit the car in front of you. It doesn't know where you're trying to go. It's just going to keep doing that. Like I'm thinking, if you fell asleep at the wheel on a highway, it's just going to keep going down the highway until you wake up, or it hits the end of the road. Like it's not gonna, or something else happens. That would be a fun experiment.
It's worth mentioning that in that car, there's a fail-safe where if you don't have your hands on the wheel, it'll just stop, right?
No, it actually does the opposite of what I would want. So it does require you to have your hands on the wheel, but I believe so does FSD. And if you don't, then you'll get an alert on the dash, and then it'll start beeping at you. And then if you don't put your hands on the wheel, it disengages. But in my experience, it only disengages like the auto steer. And so your cruise control is still on, and now it's not steering at all. And so if you have fallen asleep or whatever, it'll beep and then just disconnect, and then you will go out of your lane. So it's like,
I would teach you the hard lesson that you need to learn.
But it's interesting that you've got these like cars that have these different sort of autonomous capabilities. And if you look at like the SAE, I'm looking at the diagram here where they've got level 0 through 5. I don't remember off the top of my head what Tesla FSD, like what level that falls under. Do you know, Harris?
I thought it was 4.
Like the level. So this is the level of readiness.
It's 2.
Technology readiness level. Is that the thing?
Yeah. So level 0 is it'd be a car without any sort of autonomous driver assist features.
Mm-hmm.
Level 5 would be, well, they say here, it can drive everywhere in all conditions, and do not require you to take over driving. That's level 5.
Oh yeah.
Actually, level 3 through 5 does not require you to take. Level 4 and 5 do not require you to take over driving.
Well, it sounds like they want it to be level 4.
Yeah,
it's probably level 3, like because they still tell you like technically you have to be attentive and might have to take over.
Yeah,
but they're advertising it as like a level 4. Is that true?
You said it was 2, Harris?
Tesla is considered 2, and the highest one that I know of is Mercedes-Benz has a level 3 car that you can. It can drive itself in certain conditions. So I think it's like highway at certain speeds and that kind of stuff, but it's not like a 24/7 video game taxi kind of thing.
Here's a good distinction the SAE makes. They say level 0 through 2, you are driving whenever these driver support features are engaged, even if your feet are off the pedals and you're not steering. You must constantly supervise these support features. You must steer, brake, or accelerate as needed to maintain safety. Then level 3 through 5, it says in bold, you are not driving when these automated features are engaged, even if you are seated in the driver's seat. Level 3, though, has the clarification that says, when the feature requests, you must drive, which is why you said it was Mercedes?
Mm-hmm. Mercedes-Benz, yep.
Yeah, so that would make sense then, right? If it can only drive in certain situations, then it would request in other situations for you to drive, therefore level 3. But since you have to supervise FSD.
Yes. Because FSD requires you to, if it disengages, you have to grab the wheel. That makes it level 3. Which I've seen some pretty terrifying clips where it, so I think this is dumb. I don't think this should be a thing. But Tesla has 3 modes for self-driving, where it's like assertive, safe, and then like overly cautious or something like that. But the one I know about the most is the one that's called assertive, because every single YouTuber who goes out and drives this thing puts it in assertive mode. And this thing, like, it'll, go right up to pedestrians. It will do some, what I've heard are Jersey slides, or it'll do some aggressive lane changes in like the tiniest of gaps. And even for the guy who was testing it, he's from New Jersey, and he saw it do that like merge, and he was like, even for me, even by Jersey standards, that was assertive. That was super terrifying.
Shout out to my friend Joe, who's also from New Jersey, and I've driven in the car with him. He definitely is an assertive driver. Shout out to Joe.
But yeah, and so it's average, chill, and assertive. And maybe it's a hot take, I don't think assertive should be an option for a computer to choose when it's on the road.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah, I've seen some crazy things. Like, it seems like whatever neural network they have, it really learns to do some things that a human would not do because they know it's not the right thing to do. Like, I think there was a thing where you had 2 turn lanes. The left turn lane was completely empty because when you take that left turn onto the next road, you have to be in that one if you want to go straight. But everybody wants to make a right immediately after that left turn, so they all stay in the right left turn lane. So that one left turn lane is all backed up, but there's one left turn lane that's open. So the Tesla car is at the back of the line, goes into the empty lane because it's like, oh, I got to turn left and it's empty. I'm going to go to the front. It takes a left, and then it's like, oh, I have to go right. So I'm going to cut the guy off who's right next to me, which is totally a dick move. But it's a computer, so it doesn't know it shouldn't do that. And I would say it's more unsafe than what a human would have done. So it's definitely endangering other human drivers, which is kind of what the original question was, is like, should this car be on the road when we can't accept the whole thing, whatever the safety contract is that they sign, like, oh yeah, I'm fine with self-driving being a thing on my car.
Yeah, there's this... Oh, go ahead, Gabe.
Sorry, go ahead.
There's this funny tweet that I saw where they were like, what Tesla should do is, as it's coming down the road in like a certain radius, it should just text and like blast the person like the waiver to sign, And they were like, imagine like barreling down the street right at you, and then your phone dings, and there's like a contract to sign, like the liability waiver. And then you're like on the road in pain, and they come up to you and they're like, wait, sign the waiver before the insurance guys get here.
I feel like it's no different though in that sense than driving with like literally anyone else on the road, because there are some drivers who are like, kind of not great drivers, but you still have to drive on the road with them.
So right? Yeah, you really open up a good point. Like, we're complaining about autonomous drivers, but human drivers, I mean, we didn't watch them take the driving test.
Yeah.
Like, we don't know how good of a driver is. We don't know if they're blind, like, but we just have to trust that they're going to be okay. And I think we can trust that humans will be okay because there's a whole system that's supposed to give them a license. I think are we going to talk about that today?
Yes.
We're going to deconstruct the whole system. So we'll get to that.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, we don't trust this machine because it's created by humans and it's so new, and we know that it's far from good enough.
I think, at least my take on it is that for the most part, the vast majority of humans are kind of like, well, all kind of behave the same on the road, you know, and it's somewhat predictable. Like, yes, there are some crazy things that happen every day on the roads, but you know, it's within like a certain range. But when computers stuff goes wrong, it can be way more catastrophic than any single human could do. And I think that's like the terrifying part of it, right? I mean, look how many NASA launches end up in crashes because of the stupid stuff like the metric system and the Imperials, you know, and that's
well, but that's human error in that case.
I mean, not that one. I was thinking of the Clementine with the watchdog failure that caused the entire spacecraft to go offline because they didn't have a watchdog and they had some error and it just wrecked the system. So something like that. But yeah, I mean, you do raise a good point though with the, you know, if full self-driving could pass a driver's test, that means it should be on the road, right? And I'm pretty sure it can pass a driver's test because those are kind of easy to pass.
Yeah. But then
maybe that's a hot take. I think it's easy to pass.
In America, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it really should be much harder. Motorcycle tests are pretty, well, they're a little bit harder than a driver's test. But I think even in the US, the motorcycle driving test is pretty easy, or at least it's not as restrictive. In Europe, you have a test to drive, like, there's weight classes of motorcycles, because you've got those big 1,000 to 2,000 pound Harleys. You can't just get a single license to drive that right off the bat. Your first license is like to drive a little moped. Then you go up, and and you like get better and better because it takes different skills to drive those things. That's in Europe. That's kind of what I heard of. I don't know what the exact details. So, listeners, totally chime in if you're familiar with that.
Let the listeners chime in. But yeah, so I kind of wanted to go into. We've kind of been bashing on it for a little while, so I wanted to at least take a look from the other side and at least see what the pros are in self-driving, what the potential future pros are that might be coming down the pipeline. So there's some bias here. This is a report that Tesla itself published called the Tesla Vehicle Safety Report, right? And it's like, okay, they're publishing their own report. Maybe there's some bias, but what they have here is, maybe we'll include a link to this in the final podcast, but it's this chart that shows million miles driven before an accident occurs. On the x-axis, it's like 0 through 7. And then on the Y, it's like quarters of years. So like quarter 1 through 4 of 2023 and so on and so forth. And they have 3 categories. It's Tesla's using this autopilot technology, Tesla's not using autopilot technology, and then the US average. And in every single chart here, the US average is always like 500,000 miles driven before an accident occurs. And then the Tesla's using the autopilot technology is like 5.5 million miles driven before an accident occurs.
So it's like, how many times difference is that?
Like 5.5 divided by 0.5.
That sounds not like
11.
11. Yeah, 11. Yeah. I shouldn't have said 15.
11.
Yeah. But yeah, so 11 times so the conclusion they're trying to make is it's 11 times as safe to drive with full self-driving than to get in the car, or even get like a normal Tesla that doesn't have this autopilot technology. And I think it's a good point, but I also think it's flawed because I feel like not many cars have this full self-driving technology on them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the people who have it are probably being safer with it. But I also think there's potential here where I think if all the computers on the road were driving the cars, I think it would be safer.
So let me deconstruct that first point you made about the whole... First of all, that whole report is flawed. There's a source that I found that has a couple good counter arguments to this whole thing. First, we've already said it's only level 2, so it's not driving in every single situation. Whereas the crashes that they're using for regular cars are driving in every situation. So the cars that are driving in every situation, might be driving in the worst weather, like flooding, and then they crash. Versus a Tesla, when it's really rainy out, it can't see, it's going to say, hey, you should take over, and it will turn off self-driving. That's at least what I've read from an article. So in that situation where a human driver would have a much higher chance to crash, self-driving also does not make it safer. Second, most of the self-driving is on the highway where it's really, really, really safe anyways, and that's where most people use it, so that's why you'd have fewer crashes. You don't turn, I guess they do turn self-driving on when you're taking turns and stuff in neighborhoods, but I have a feeling that most people are just using it in regular highway conditions where it's the most easy. And third, the people who buy Teslas are wealthier and generally safer drivers in the first place. So the people driving Teslas, like you said, Harris, are already safer than the people who are just the everyday population. And that's just statistically from insurance companies. That's like data that they've gathered. So the people driving Teslas are safer, and they're using the self-driving in very safe situations. And the Tesla car won't let itself be driven in unsafe situations. So that all will inflate that self-driving safety number. That's what I've read from a source. Those are counter arguments. And I don't know, what do you guys think? Kind of went on a rant there.
There's a lot of conflicting variables then.
Yeah. Like, it's not as simple as just, Tesla has autopilot and it's safer. There's things that are causing it, could be also causing that number to be higher. That is not just because, confounding variables. You're right, Gabe.
Conflating is not the word I was looking for.
Same thing.
I totally agree with all of your points, except for the one that wealthier drivers drive safer, because I think I've seen a lot of evidence to the contrary on that one.
It's hard to, I think you'd have to look at like an insurance database. From the article I found, that's what they said. And I would agree, like, maybe not wealthier, but they said middle class, middle income, not the wealthiest, not the lowest income. So like middle income people. Engineers, I guess I would say engineers, they're pretty safe drivers, I think.
Yeah. So Gabe, you would push back on this report as well?
I think so. Well, I mean, first of all, there's a conflict of interest, right? Because this is a Tesla report. And all the confounding variables that you mentioned, Nick. What I'm interested in is, you said the numbers that you have are how many miles before an accident occurs or before a death occurs?
How many million miles driven before an accident occurs?
So what I'm curious is, I've got the IIHS yearly snapshot for these numbers for the U.S.
IIHS?
Huh?
What is the IIHS?
It's the International Institute for Highway Safety, or Insurance Institute for Highway Safety. They do all the crash tests. Crash tests and ratings. Yeah, that's them. So like, they have a number here. They have a nice graph of deaths per 100 million miles, which is slightly different than the number you have. And I'm just wondering if we can compare these somehow.
It's hard because the Tesla graph doesn't have numbers on it. You just have to eyeball it.
See?
They don't have numbers. Are you sure?
I don't know if you ever.
Table of numbers.
I don't know if you ever saw the. This is an aside, but when Apple released the Mac, or the new silicon chip, whatever it was called, I already forgot the name of it. The M1 chip or something like that. The M1, yeah. When they released it, they also accompanied it with this graphic that's like, it's like twice as fast as like a Windows computer or something, and they just had this arbitrary curve, and then there were no numbers on it. So everyone looked at it and they were like, "But what does this mean, though?" I feel like that's what this plot by Tesla is too.
It'd be interesting to get some real numbers and like compare them against different sources.
Well, I will say, I'm looking at the chart too. It seems like the numbers for general driver, the million miles thing, it's around 500,000 miles 500,000 miles per death. Or per accident, maybe not death.
In what year?
And that's like from 2023 to 2018. It actually is pretty constant. Actually, no, in 2019, it looks like it went up by a little bit. 2019, it was around. Goes up here. Yeah, 2019, it was like 300,000 miles. And then in 2020, it goes up to 500,000. And then it's pretty constant. It doesn't actually vary as much, at least with the scale that they show us. There's still going to be some variance, but.
So we can just divide the numbers to get so sorry, say again, like if we look at like 20, this goes up to 2021. So like what's the number you have for 2021?
500,000 miles per accident.
Per accident, so not per death.
Right.
Okay, so these are per death, so that's already a different metric. So that's already a different metric.
But you would probably get more miles per death because not every accident causes a death. So your number should be higher.
1.37 deaths per 100 million miles in 2021.
All right.
But
let's.
I find it interesting that Tesla is releasing accident statistics because I feel like maybe I'm wrong here, but I thought accidents were harder to determine than like because of death, somebody died, so that's like a stat, right? But an accident, I feel like can be up to deliberation. It might end up in courts and that kind of stuff. Because like if you just door ding someone, like that doesn't get reported as an accident, right? But like,
or does it?
I don't know. Like maybe
if there's an insurance claim, right? Would that not be counted as an accident?
I'm not sure.
If this is like insurance data, who knows?
Yeah. But anyway, I was surprised they were releasing that. Like I didn't think they would release something like that. I don't even. Did this say how they're determining it?
It's actually at the bottom. There's a section that says methodology. It says we receive a crash. We receive a crash alert anytime a crash is reported to us from the fleet. The fleet is like all of Tesla cars, I think. And this may include data about whether autopilot was active at the time of impact. So that's how they choose whether it was autopilot or not autopilot caused, or if that bin it falls into. And it says we count any crash in which autopilot was deactivated within 5 seconds before impact. So I think they're supposed to account for that thing I said where it's bad weather, autopilot will turn off, but still doesn't really count because some people won't even try to turn on autopilot if it's bad. And we count all crashes in which the incident alert indicated an airbag or other active restraint deployed.
Okay.
And yeah, it doesn't seem like they really say how a Tesla car says it's a crash. It just says when their car says there's a crash that's occurred, that is when there's a crash. But maybe they're saying when an airbag is deployed, that's a crash.
Yeah,
but I don't know.
But you can get into some serious accidents without the airbag going off. Like I hit a deer and totaled my car and the airbag never went off. Seatbelt tensioner never activated.
Seatbelt never activated. That's
so like it could be like they wouldn't have counted that then in that case.
Maybe
as an accident.
And that's also actually I don't have anything else to say. That should have been counted, but it sounds like Tesla might not have counted that in that specific case if the airbag never deployed. But it is vague. They don't tell you exactly what causes them to say it's a crash or not. And that's probably the other thing. Or an accident, not even a crash.
Yeah.
Were there any active restraints when you hit the deer?
Say again?
Were there any other active restraints deployed when you hit the deer?
I mean, the only things I can think of is airbag and seatbelt tensioner, but neither of those activated.
Yeah.
Did you like
hitting that deer was not an accident?
Yeah, just not.
It was on purpose, targeted. The car knew you wanted to do it. Yeah, but the report is very
It's
very vague. It's vague, and I know you're saying, Harris, it's surprising they released the crash data, but I would push back and say they wouldn't have released it if it wasn't good. If it was bad, they would never have shown us this, and this never would have came out.
That is true.
At least that's a claim. That's obviously there's a chance. There's some world where they still would have released if it was bad, but they're a company trying to sell you Tesla cars. They want you to think the car is safe, so they're going to put out their own thing. Now, I would have trusted it more if they had independent statisticians, actuarial scientists look at their data and determine like anything, because they would have thought about all of those confounding variables and said like, well, yeah, we can't really say if the autopilot is safer than the other cars. One other big thing is the sample size is very different, because all cars on the road compared to just all Teslas on the road is a very, very big ratio. Yeah. I don't have the number on my hand, but it is, I mean, you can just think of all cars in the US versus Teslas. It's going to be a very different number. Ford probably makes like at least 100 times more vehicles than Tesla. Just because of the sheer size.
Like an enthusiast vehicle. It's still like an early adopter kind of thing, even though they made a surprising amount of progress for a company that didn't know how to make cars. They kind of found themselves a spot, and Elon's fanboys kind of propelled them to actually becoming a company.
Yeah.
And are there numbers also for like all Teslas around the world, or is it just US?
Oh, I'm not even sure. I think they just said the fleet. So I'm assuming
so
that would mean all around the world?
That makes it even harder to compare numbers then. The interesting thing to me... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I think it would make sense if it was all around the world, but they are just because they said the whole fleet. But it does... They're comparing with US numbers. So, not sure.
Yeah. That's going to be a harder number to track down, I think, because they usually do the quarterly vehicle sold number is the one I'm seeing, but they don't really. Yeah, it gets tricky.
Worldwide.
So my stats is hard.
And you can, I mean, in statistics, you can really make the numbers say whatever you want them to say, and that's why it is so important to have, peer review and multiple independent sources verify the numbers and the analysis.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
because like one report from anybody, no matter who it's coming from, kind of doesn't do you much good.
Yeah, well, unless I wrote it, then it's good. So it's the Elon approach. But yeah, so I kind of wanted to maybe give an angle as to how self-driving could be good. I think I picked a bad source, but I also kind of intentionally picked it because I saw that graph and I was kind of like, I want to see what Nick and Gabe can chew on this and how they can roast it, because it's not a good report at all, even though there probably is a better way to make a report like that. Mm-hmm. So that was to kind of try and take a look at when self-driving is good or it can benefit humanity. And I still believe that once it's all solved, quote unquote, I don't know if it'll ever fully be solved, but I think it will result in less casualties. But I'd like to contradict myself immediately by talking about when self-driving goes horrifically bad. So there's already, you guys have probably heard about some fatalities that happened from Tesla full self-driving cars out there. There was the one, because Teslas use all cameras, because Elon's reasoning was, we do it with our eyes, so cars can do it with cameras, and they don't need LiDAR or radar or any other sensors. And it couldn't distinguish between the blue sky and like the blue of a truck, and it just plowed into the truck. And I don't know if the person died from that, but that's still not like a great look for like a self-driving car, right? So there's been,
Can I just add another example to that as well?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, there's a crazy video I saw of a guy who was using full self-driving while he was drunk, thinking it's fine because it'll drive itself. So that almost, alludes back to our previous point.
God.
But he responded to some like a few hundred requests or something to keep his hands on the wheel. And yet there's video, dash cam video from this. He's on this highway at night, and up ahead there are emergency vehicles with lights on, red and blue flashing lights in the right-hand lane. Any human would have seen them from a mile away. I'm sure they showed up on the camera in the Tesla. But despite that, it still rear-ended them at highway speed.
Wow,
So,
that is very dangerous.
Even in situations that seem favorable to a camera, it still, can fail. So, anyway, just wanted,
Yeah.
I mean, he basically brought himself right to him. Then he could take the kill. Made their job easier.
The car was so smart that it hand delivered him to the ambulance to get him back to the hospital.
You need an ambulance.
There was also, I've seen a lot of videos of Teslas struggling to figure out construction cones from railings. I don't know what they're called, but when you merge onto a ramp, there's those little railings on the side.
Mm-hmm.
That and just a person or a biker. Yeah, a guardrail. It kind of struggles to figure out which of those three it is. And there's been some clips of people driving, and it'll be like a construction zone, and it'll keep phasing between these three different things. And if it phases to a biker or something, it behaves differently because it thinks there's a person there. And it's kind of scary to watch because the car will be going, it'll start swerving on the road because it's kind of changing how it's behaving in real time. But if you're a human, you look at it, you're like, oh, it's a construction cone. And you're not going to start swerving the vehicle all across the road.
These models lack so much context. There's also another thing with cones where it's, what if you have a truck that's carrying construction cones? Even if you fix the construction cone issue, now it thinks, oh my God, I'm going 80 miles per hour and there's a construction cone 3 feet away from me. I got to stop because I'm going to rear end it. So it's even that, it just has no idea why the cone is there. Whereas a human, you immediately know, oh, there's construction going on. I'm just not going to hit the cone.
So yeah, I want to talk about one particular example here because I think this kind of touches on some of the good things that it could be used for and shows what happens when it all goes terribly wrong. So there was this company called Cruise that was a self-driving car company, but they were aimed at driverless taxi. And that was kind of their main thing. I think them and Waymo were given unlimited commercial expansion in San Francisco. So there was a lot of trust given to them by the city, and they were going to kind of define what robotaxis could be, and maybe dethrone Uber and that kind of stuff and usher in a new kind of business model and show what AI could be used for. And Cruise went through some extremely hot water when one of their driverless cars plowed into a pedestrian who was jaywalking. And there's a really cool link that we'll include in the podcast description that kind of breaks down what happened during this crash. But basically, this person jaywalks across the street. The Cruise car is in the right lane, and then to the left, there was a Nissan driven by a human. It's a 2-lane road. It turns green, and they both go. And the Nissan hits the jaywalker and starts swerving. And then the jaywalker, I think, falls into the lane where the Cruise vehicle is. And then the Cruise vehicle hits the woman. And its first protocol is to say, pull over. And so it drags this poor woman underneath the car for 20 feet or something. And then it stops. And she lived. She healed, I hope, and recovered and everything. But this is one of those cases where they had independent firms come in and do some analysis of what happened, a root cause analysis and everything. And they said it should have definitely stopped when there was an obstacle in front. And yeah, and I think robotaxis are a great idea, but I think this probably set the whole thing back by 20 years or something. And I'm curious if you think this is a case of too much too soon, or if this is trying to solve the wrong problem, and namely the problem of driving and public transport and car-centric cities.
So you're saying the idea of putting a robo-taxi, is that just the wrong way to go about it? Is that what that second thing you were saying is?
Is it a band-aid solution to the wrong problem?
Well, I think it's specifically with Cruise, they're a company trying to make money, so they don't care about what issue they're actually solving. Besides, people use Uber and Lyft, and we could probably make it cheaper by having a bunch of cars that drive themselves, so we don't even have to split our profits with actual people who drive the cars. I don't think they're even caring about what the solution to the problem is. It's like somebody needs to go somewhere, here's a car that'll get you there. I don't think they care about the greater impact. The other part about that, the Band-Aid, like, should we actually just not even fund self-driving cars? Like the idea of self-driving cars, that one's really deep. That one's tough it's very nuanced. And I think it depends on the person, but there's a lot of cities who have shown that you don't need cars to get around in the first place. And definitely with public transport. Most of them are European, I think, but there's a couple examples in the US. And I've personally thought, why are we focusing on self-driving cars? Like, why don't we start simpler, more fundamental with self-driving trains? Like, those only go two directions, forward and backwards. There's probably a lot fewer situations. Like, you can demonstrate that works much easier and then ramp it up to cars where you have all these other situations. I feel like that would be, obviously there's not as much money in there. Well, I'm talking like an engineer of like, how are we going to get this technology out? Tesla's trying to make money and get self-driving out there because that's like their selling point. But as a society, I would say we should simplify it. It's too much too soon, what you said, Harris. I think it's trying to put it everywhere because it's a hot topic.
Trying to profit off of the new craze. Kind of thing.
Yeah, like ChatGPT was a big thing. Probably still is a big thing, but it's like once people realize it's just something that talks to you and you're like, oh, a human could do that. Why would I talk to this robot? It's like, it's not really that fun. It's nice for it to edit your papers and make it sound better, but I'd rather be able to do that myself. So I want to learn that skill myself.
I mean, these days, everything is a chatbot. I mean, the chatbot wrote this podcast, so, you know, failing forward LLM or failing forward GPT.
Nice.
Yeah.
What were you going to say, Gabe? I feel like you were...
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. I was just going to say with, I mean, trains is a really interesting point, like comparing that to self-driving, because it's like, yeah, there are a ton of examples. Yeah, especially if you look to like, you know, China even, which is a huge country, and they have bullet trains that travel hundreds of miles an hour, and we don't really have anything like that here. You know? And I think it's like, we're like so car-centric, and our entire country is like paved. And at this point, it's like we're too far gone, you know, like from an engineering perspective to even build out the infrastructure again that you would need for high-speed rail, autonomous or not, you know, is such, I think, such an extensive like upfront cost compared to starting to develop self-driving cars when you can use, well, existing cars and existing roads, you know? And I think there's also like a big social aspect to it as well. Cause like, yeah, I'm trying to think of an example. Like if you're in like the Springs and you have to commute to Denver every day, yeah, a train would be like way more economical, right? And in theory, a lot more convenient. Like if you could get on the train right by your house and it's fast, it could be faster than driving, right? So you'd get there faster. And while you're on the train, you don't have to worry about, you know, operating the vehicle at all.
Mhm.
But there's this like social thing about it, especially like with like the American culture. There's such a emphasis on like independence, and so it's suddenly if you give up your car and now you're reliant on the train to get to and from work, you've completely gotten rid of a big part of like like independence in your life, And so I think convincing people of the value in that is really tough as well.
I like that you brought up Denver, because the Denver International Airport has a fleet of 3 trains that'll get you, or it might be 2, maybe 3 trains. I don't know how many they have now, but the point is it gets you from like terminal to baggage claim. There's like A, B, and C, and then like baggage claim.
3 terminals, right? Or 4?
3 terminals and the baggage claim makes 4 stops,
yeah.
right? And they announced this expansion project to go up to like 35 or 50 trains or something. Like they're dramatically expanding, because I mean, they realize that it's not enough to service the insane amount of traffic that the airport gets, right? And so I don't know, in that sense, is that a sufficient enough counter argument to say that we do have public transport in places that are extremely highly trafficked, and that eventually maybe it'll work its way into more like cities and stuff like that? Because Pittsburgh has like a lot of public transport, right?
Yeah, I would say Pittsburgh's not the best still, but it has buses that will get you places. The only problem is you just have to not be on a tight timeline. But that's not because public transit is like that. That's just the way Pittsburgh has done it, because they're putting buses in the same roads that cars are in. So it's going to take longer than just driving, because they have to stop at stops. But if they had dedicated bus lanes that made it so it wasn't stuck in the same traffic, that would help fix the issue. But it's hard to do that when your roads are already set up. And so that's the big reason why buses are not a great solution without changing anything else. And that's why self-driving car, in theory, would be better, because it's just as good as driving. Perhaps a little bit better, just like you don't have to do anything on when you're being driven around. But if you design your infrastructure better so that the bus is faster, it transports more people just as efficiently or more efficiently than a car, then it would be a net benefit. It would just cost a little bit more money. And I wanted to circle back. Doesn't Denver have a tram that goes out to some surrounding suburbs? Not as far as Colorado Springs, but like the city of Denver, not the airport.
Yeah.
I don't know how far it goes, but yes, it does.
Yeah.
I've never ridden it, so I don't know how good it is, but
yeah, it is. I mean, getting between cities is really tough. Because then that's where you need the high speed rail. But it's like, I think that's up to, I just watched this. There's a lot of really good YouTube channels of people who are transportation engineers or just enthusiasts about all this stuff. Not Just Bikes is probably the best one that I know.
Yeah.
He just talks about city design. And I just watched a video from him where they were talking about adding a lane to a highway to give more car infrastructure. And the whole U.S. Department of Transportation is always focused on car traffic. So they hire these people to design the highway or improve their highway. And those people are always going to think of, can we add another lane to the highway? And we're going to tell you this is how many more cars would be transported if we add a lane to your highway. But they're not being paid to figure out the best solution to move people. They're being paid to build another lane on the highway. So they're going to tell you, just like Tesla is telling you with their self-driving, if you add another lane and pay us a bunch of money, it'll improve your traffic. But then the ultimate end goal, or what the ultimate result is, that you have more people being transported, but it's less efficient because more people start using the highway because they think, oh, another lane is there. But then you just get more traffic than before, actually. So it's really counterintuitive. There's a lot of, and I think there's been like 30 or 40 years of research. Like, people have thought about this, and the only limiting thing now is not that what to do, it's just doing it. But like Gabe, you said, made a really good point. It's all about money. Like, are people going to pay for this? like our politicians going to allocate money.
You have to convince them that this is better than the solution we currently have in place.
Yeah. And I wanted to make the counter argument to that with just Googling quick. Apparently the National Highways Traffic Safety Administration, they say that traffic accidents cost the entire country of the United States $871 billion with a B dollars per year. That's a lot of money. But I think that is a number that's not directly coming out of anybody's pocket. At least, like, they can estimate it because it's how much does ambulance cost? How much are you paying people to go to these accidents every year? If you had public transport, that number would definitely go down.
Mm-hmm.
But again, they're not seeing that directly coming out. It's like a loop where it goes from the state to ambulances and public services to go to that accident, but they can't see that that is caused because of the road, so they're not going to allocate money towards building trains or anything like that, because they're going to say, oh, we're actually spending more money in the short term. And that's the thing. You can't immediately see that it's going to save you money in the long term.
But
it's like you're... Go ahead.
I think you bring up a lot of good points, and I think the biggest one...
Thank you.
That is maybe the biggest like mental hurdle for a lot of people is the time that you have to sacrifice. Because, I think of back in undergrad on campus, there were buses coming once every like 10 or 20 minutes. And even then, inevitably, just because of how life is, you're going to miss a bus and you have to wait there for 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. And I feel like because it was college and I didn't have an option, I had to be okay with that, right? Where it's like, oh, I'm going to be like 5 minutes late to lecture or something. But in today's world where it's like, I need to get to the meeting like on time and I got to get in the building by this time. And, this is America, right? We look at a mountain and we decide we can pave it and put a gift shop at the top and sell pizza and donuts. Like, that's the America I want to live in, right?
Shout out Pikes Peak.
shout out Pikes Peak, Like, I'm going to put, a freaking railroad, put a train that goes up to the mountain.
they have that, right? Are they going to have a helicopter soon? How does that work?
Oh, it'd be great.
I don't know if they have a helicopter to the top, but why not, right?
It's a good business opportunity. I say we start one up, Start
autonomous helicopter to the top of Pikes Peak.
They're gonna do like the escalator up the whole mountain.
Yeah.
You just stand there, an escalator.
But I think it's gonna be hard to overcome that hurdle because it's not normal. Like, we've normalized, being able to hop in the car and get to wherever you're trying to go, like, as soon as possible. And like you guys said, we've already paved over everything, and so all the roads like are there and they're all ready to go. The infrastructure is like more or less set up and good to go. So do you think it's like a failure to plan our societies correctly? Because I don't have the sources pulled up, but I remember we lost the fight where trains were booming in America for a while. And then when Henry Ford and the Model T came out, they won that fight. And the result is paved America. Because trains used to be huge, like much larger than they were now. And then they just went away after that fight was lost. So was it a failure there? Is it a failure now to kind of try and pivot, even though we have everything paved? Like, there are ways we can start getting our way back, but it seems like nobody's interested in that. And instead, let's just throw a neural net at the problem and make every car an independent AI. Like, I'm curious what you guys think is the real problem here, or if it's a combination of all of those.
I think I'll let you go, Gabe. I've talked a lot.
I was just going to say, like, imagine a scenario, even if you have a company that has a ton of money that they're willing to throw at the problem and says, we want to make this really awesome, like, bus or train, infrastructure that'll get people from point A to B, like Colorado Springs to Denver, or within Denver, wherever. And, it's all going to be on time. and it'll be clean. And let's say it is, right? Like, it's really great. Again, like, even if you had such a system in place, there would still be that social hurdle to get past, to convince people to ditch the car or whatever and give this, train system or bus system a chance. And it's kind of interesting. Some cities will take the approach where they'll, set up a bus route, and I think it's cheaper. It is cheaper because, again, you can just use existing roads. So you've got a bus route, and they'll even do stuff like set up their bus stops to like mimic train stations. It's like a raised platform, heated and cooled, clean. They, pride themselves on the whole thing being clean.
That's bougie.
Yeah. Well, and they see more ridership doing stuff like that, to try to get past that social hurdle. So, yeah, there are definitely like approaches that you can take. So I don't think it's like too late, but.
Yeah, it's a good point. Something I've heard a lot of people say is that the option of riding a bus or riding a train or a tram or anything like that is usually seen as like the lower class thing to do. And you're right, that's the social thing. Like, we've been taught to think of those things as not as a good option, or only as an option if you just couldn't afford a car. And honestly, because the car is the better option, but it doesn't mean that a bus is always a bad option. It's just if it's well designed, that could be the better option. It would be the better option. But like in Chicago suburbs, they have like the Pace buses, and they look so grimy. They have the number of what bus it is supposed to tell you where it goes. I don't know what the hell that means, because it's a little bit cryptic. Like, you don't know. Even if I had to take the bus, it would take me like 30 minutes to figure out, just for where I want to get to, which bus I should take.
Yeah.
I don't even know how often the buses come. I don't know if it's as good. Like, it's a whole new thing you have to learn that you're not. Yeah. That's another hurdle that people will think like, oh, I'm just going to take my car. I don't want to think about it. And the final thing is also, this is more of a, not sure if it's true, what I'm going to say, but I have a feeling people like to isolate themselves in their car. They're getting used to it. And that's definitely a market for, like, there's SUVs that are self-defense vehicles or something, where they're like, there's some crazy video of like an SUV with mace somewhere in the car where you press a button and it sprays the people at your window with mace. And they're like bulletproof windows. Like, there are some people who are definitely scared of interacting with other humans, and a bus and a train is going to make you do that. And we're like, oh my God, I don't want to deal with that. And I personally think it's fun, but there's definitely, if you're given the option to stay by yourself and that's what you want to do, you'd probably take that option too. I wonder what the rates are in the US versus like other countries of that type of mentality, but that's really hard to quantify. But it's just an idea.
By the way, that car is called the Rezvani, Rezvani. I looked into this a while back because I saw it in a movie, and I was like, there's no way this thing is real. And I looked it up. It's a real car that you could just buy tomorrow and drive around. And it's got like these blinding lights on the top. It's got like pepper spray. It's got like a loudspeaker, tinted windows. This thing will get you through the zombie apocalypse and into, I don't know, the next ice age instead, it's insane.
The models, oh my God, the model names are Vengeance. Actually, you should say these, Gabe. You got a good voice for this.
All right. What do I look up here?
I'm gonna message you the thing, and I want you to.
Yeah.
Okay, go to this link and then scroll down to just the SUV looking cars. Starting with Vengeance.
Starting with Vengeance?
Yeah, and then just go down.
Should I say it differently than just Vengeance?
I don't know.
You gotta say it like a movie trailer, like a movie trailer. This summer,
Vengeance.
Oh my God.
Well, then there's just Tank Military Edition.
Yeah.
Oh, good, because it's twice the price. It's $260,000 instead of $175,000.
Oh my God. 20.
Can you do like a fake ad reading Like to say like failing forward today is brought to you by Rizvani, and then talk about like that model.
Failing forward brought to you by Rizvani. Did I say that? Let me try again. Failing forward. Oh, I got it. Great with the vengeance.
You did.
Failing forward. Brought to you by Rizvani. Try the all new. Unknown year. 2024. Vengeance. Or the Hercules 6x6. Starting at $295,000.
There we go. There's our ad read for the day.
There's hardly any information about these though.
Yeah, the only things are like bulletproof.
Yeah.
Well, let's be real. You're only buying those cars if you're like putting them in a hip hop video, in a movie, or if you're like a dictator from some other country. You know, like you're not walking up to the dealership
at the bottom
and driving one of those out. You know.
Yeah. The price point of these cars is definitely way more than the common person's going to be able to afford. But, I mean, that goes back to the point wealthy people don't want to drive, don't want to be on a bus. But a counterpoint I heard is if you go to like Austria or Switzerland, there's definitely a ton of wealthy people there. But they ride trains, you know, maybe there's a first class. I don't know how the trains work over there, but they'll take a train and, you know, they're just like normal people. Even though they're making like millions of dollars a year, because it's smart.
It's a social thing.
Yeah. So it's the fact that those cars exist. You probably say, "Oh, there's somebody who's going to buy the car."
Yeah.
Or the tank, I guess you could say.
The tank, 6x6 tank, military edition.
What about like? Okay, this is a really bad example. I'm going to open by saying this is a terrible example.
Okay.
But do you guys know what the Boring Company is?
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's Elon Musk's like tunnel boring company thing, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So he basically made these tunnels, and then he has these like little sleds that you can drive your car onto, and then it'll take you through this tunnel at like crazy fast speeds, and then it'll just deposit you at like some hotspot or something like that, right? Now, just for the sake of the argument, let's just ignore all the obvious problems with this and how it doesn't really solve anything.
He built a train, but he didn't put a train in it.
But does something like that solve the issue of like the stigma of having to share like a train car with somebody else?
Mm-hmm. Wait, what were you saying?
Question mark.
Yeah, there's a stigma, question mark. What was it? Say it again.
Do you think that solves the stigma of public transport?
Well, it's not really public transport, though.
Yeah.
No, exactly.
Your own car onto it.
Yeah.
If it was like a bus of pods or something like that, where each pod was for one person or two people max.
But you don't have ownership of the pod, and you can't hop in the pod and take it at the instant that you want to go somewhere. So you have to give up all that stuff, you know?
So I think we're starting to touch on society as a much larger problem here.
I think so. But
it's like an instant gratification thing where it's like, I gotta go, I'm gonna go now, and then you hop in and go.
Yeah, there is some aspect of that. I want to be hopeful and say there's change that's happening. Like people are talking about it. They're thinking about how do we get to this point. And it's not easy. Like there's the money issue, there's the social issue. But eventually, like it's going to take years to decades to go anywhere, just in a single city probably. And I've been thinking about this thing. I wasn't sure when to bring it up. Is like the idea of the half measure versus the full measure. Because first Tesla is doing this half measure thing with, we'll just give you a little bit of self-driving, but it doesn't quite work. And we'll put some of them on the road, and you've got things that humans aren't used to driving with, these Teslas. So then it causes even more issues than if you had actually made a good self-driving car and either implemented it fully or replaced all cars with fully self-driving things. Like that would have been a more full measure that probably would work out better, but they're doing like toes in the water thing because they're still trying to do research. And I think the other thing is happening now with trying to get public transport to work is another half measure with, oh, let's put a bike lane in the road, which is a little bit better, but like, are people going to use that? Because I'm scared of getting hit by a car if I'm on the road just because of how drivers are. And it's just like poorly implemented ideas where people think, I want people to be able to ride their bike to places, but it's not really the best idea. And there's got to be like a full measure taken somewhere along the way. You can't just put a bike lane on a road and say, well, nobody's using it. Nobody wants to ride a bike. Well, no, that's not the case. The bike lane is a shitty idea. So you should have done something where you would want to ride a bike there and then people will use it. It's a lot of infrastructure is, how people think. So build it with the idea of you can take a bus to this place and then rent a bike and go to this place. Like the whole system that you've set up, people will use it the best way that it's intended to be used, based on how you design it. Like if you made it so that they could never use a car, obviously nobody's going to use a car. They're going to use whatever you've given them. But if you only give them a car to use, they're only going to use a car. So that's my final remark. Not final. I mean, I've got more to say. We'll probably talk more.
Pops off the here.
I feel like that's a conclusion to some ideas that I've been bringing up.
I'm glad you brought up bike lanes because, Gabe, I know you're a big road cycler. And so I'm curious whether or not you agree with
Gabe made a face
viewpoint.
like,
You've road cycled a lot, right? So, and you seem really comfortable.
Yeah.
We've road cycled together a few times here. And I've kind of shared in the beginning when I first started cycling, especially in Colorado, I shared Nick's point more of, oh, this is terrifying. There's like a SUV a couple feet away from me, and it could just plow me. If the driver nods up for a second and veers to the right, I'm in the hospital for months kind of vibe, right? But Gabe, I feel like you're very, very comfortable with road cycling, and you seem to be fine with it, right? So do you disagree with what Nick said about bike lanes, or do you still think it's a valid concern?
Because I mean, I would take a bike path over a bike lane any day.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like with our cities so car-centric, sometimes the only thing you can do is a bike lane. So if you want a bike lane's better than nothing. Right?
Yeah, it's better than driving on the sidewalk, which the thing in the US too is weird that they treat bicycles like cars.
Yeah, you shouldn't ride your bike on the sidewalk.
Yeah, because it's like that would be the only other. Well, I guess you could also
personally attacked.
No, oh, you drive it on the sidewalk?
I drive my car on the sidewalk. Yeah.
Just go around the traffic at the red light.
That's something a Tesla would do.
I've seen like service pickup trucks so the sidewalks where I live are really, really wide. And so service pickup trucks will sometimes go right on that sidewalk to get to like, there's like some companies and stuff there. They'll go there to get there. And then I'm just like, there's like a mom and her children walking right there. What are you going to do? Are you going to just turn into the grass and go onto the road?
Only society tells you can't drive on the sidewalk.
So it's a 10-minute bike ride to work. And I bike on the sidewalk because there's no bike lanes. Now, even if there was a bike lane, I probably wouldn't use it because that intersection is like 45, but people go 60 in the morning on that intersection. And these legs cannot do 60 miles per hour.
And you also said the sidewalk's really wide, so it's like, it sounds like it's not even a person sidewalk. It's like closer to a, I don't know, industrial or just something that's wide enough where you can ride a bike safely and get around people.
So,
Gabe, you're wrong, is what I'm trying to say.
Oh, do you want to know what the law is in Colorado?
Oh, not the law.
A person riding a bicycle or electrical assisted bicycle upon and along a sidewalk or pathway or across a roadway upon and along a crosswalk. Wow, they need commas or something.
Yeah.
Shall yield the right of way to any pedestrian and shall give an audible signal before overtaking and passing such pedestrian. A person riding a bicycle in a crosswalk shall do so in a manner that is safe for pedestrians. So it looks like
it's
a
legal.
person shall not ride a bicycle upon a sidewalk or pathway where such use of bicycles is prohibited. Oh, thanks.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, where it says no
but the
bicycles.
no bike sign, like a highway.
Yeah.
You can't do it on a highway.
10.d was deleted by laws 2005. Chapter 301.
Very good.
We're getting really deep into Colorado law here.
We're going to the lore here.
It looks like you can, but you just have to, say on your left or whatever as you pass by.
I prefer to plow the pedestrians in their response.
Hey, that would be in violation of Colorado state law. Never mind the injuries involved.
The guy
you get
you
10
hit.
bonus points every person you hit.
The guy you hit is like, you're violating Colorado state law right now. I'm calling the police.
Doesn't
and he's like bleeding out on the sidewalk. Yeah. Oh my god.
Well, actually, there's this is a TikTok, but about like in Germany, it sounds like the exact opposite is a thing. Like if you're walking in the bicycle lane, and they actually have bike paths. If you're walking in the bicycle lane, people will just ram into you. Like they probably won't because they don't want to. But the TikTok was like the bicycle person just hit the guy, knocked him over. Was like, "What are you doing? You're walking in the bike lane." So it's like they're less forgiving over there, where like the stigma is like, "This is the bike lane. Don't walk in the bike lane." Yeah.
Have you seen I think it was a Casey Neistat video where he got like a citation or something for, I think it might have been for biking on the sidewalk.
Oh, because he's in New York, right? Because they're very weird about that.
Yeah, and so they were like, you have to bike in the bike lane. And so then he had this whole bit where he would bike in the bike lane and was talking and then would just crash into whatever random object was in the bike lane.
Yeah. Exactly.
Be it a car or a pile of boxes or a trash can.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the video, the one object in the bike lane was the police car. And so he's biking along and just crashes straight into the cop car. It's kind of funny.
Yeah.
That was definitely a thing back in undergrad where bikers would get really mad because you get all the college students, head down on the phone, just walking, and they don't realize they're in the bike lane, and you got this guy who goes zooming, right? And either he has to stop or he's about to like give this guy like a bad days or something like that. But yeah. So speaking of bad driving, I wanted to get back to one of the first points we discussed a little bit earlier. And it kind of goes in the theme of if self-driving is like a Band-Aid fix for a larger problem. Because, and I'm going to go back to the bad Tesla report. I'm sorry, guys, but I've got to go back to the conflict of interest report.
No!
But one of the points they make is, that using self-driving is safer than humans driving, right? And we're talking a little bit about, well, if a Tesla car could pass a driving exam, then we should trust it and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And I was kind of wondering, do you guys think it is too easy to get a driver's license in America?
Yes.
I agree, by the way. I 100% agree.
It's very weird because it's easy, but they arbitrarily make it difficult. Because it's like, oh, if you touch a curb, then you fail. Is that how it is? Or you lose points? There's some weird thing.
Depends state to state, I think.
Maybe it does. I know in Illinois, they make you do like 3 maneuvers, and there's like 5 maneuvers you can do, and it's just to operate the vehicle. It's not really safe driving. It's just, can you park a car? Can you back your car up without messing it up? I think there is a thing if you break a law, if you like don't completely stop at a stop sign, and that means tires are not rolling. You can't do a rolling stop, which is like, they're just like, who cares? Like if you're teaching me to drive as if nobody's going to do that in the real world. The test that they're testing you on is not testing you on the skills you actually need to drive the car. Yeah. Is basically the point.
Yeah.
So Nick, you got your license in Illinois, right?
Yes.
Okay, so we probably had similar driving exams, but Gabe, did you get yours in
Mine
Jersey?
Probably went better than yours.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
So, Gabe, I was curious what your experience was like doing your driving exam in New Jersey.
Yeah, the first thing I remember about all that is there's a page in the driver's handbook that it's a whole paragraph about how you shouldn't use your fax machine while operating your vehicle.
Oh my God.
I have a picture of it somewhere. There was also to show how much value we place, on the quality of this material that we're giving to new drivers.
Mm-hmm.
There was an entire page with no spaces or punctuation. Just one big word.
What?
Wow.
That's a throwback to Germany. That's crazy.
No, but it sounds like it's pretty similar. I mean, you just drive around in a parking lot, stop at a stop sign. Oh, you have to ask the guy to put his seatbelt on, and he'll say no.
Yeah. He'll say no.
I didn't have that. I did not have that.
Twin Jersey, I'm not gonna do that, you fucking moron.
You nailed the
In a
accent.
parking lot.
Yeah, he got in, and I was like, "Can you please put your seatbelt on?" And he goes, "Doesn't even look at me." No, that's all right. Sorry, but if you
this test
don't
is over
ask
now,
him,
and he gets out.
well, but if you don't ask him, he will end the test because you're supposed to ask.
Okay.
But so does he not wear the seatbelt, and then you're okay?
Yeah, because you asked him. That's what mattered. It's arbitrary thing. It's arbitrary things like that. Yeah, stopping at a stop sign, being able to parallel park and do a K-turn and obey the 15-mile-an-hour speed limit or whatever.
Right. That's the other thing. 1 mile per hour.
I want to go back to the seatbelt thing. What are they trying to have you learn there? Like, it's okay if your friend doesn't want to buckle in as long as you ask them first? Is that the point?
No, so the intent is that you should... Oh, go ahead.
Let's do a role play. Gabe, you are driving, and I'm gonna be the guy who sits down. Okay. Open the door. All right, I'm your driving instructor. All right, I'm sitting down. All right, you ready to? You can start whenever.
All right, yeah. Hello, sir. Could you please put your seatbelt on, please?
No, I'm fine. But I do have a joint in my pocket if you want to smoke it. You gonna make the right decision today?
These days, I think that's legal in New Jersey.
I think it might actually be. But I guess the whole point with this role play is like it's like doing the cool, like a cop pretending to be somebody who's like a bad influence. Yeah. They're like, no, really. You don't need to wear your seatbelt either, bro. This restricts you. When you get in a crash, you want your limbs you want to be able to get out of the seat. It's a dumb idea.
And then he went, "Sir, is that a fax machine?" And then the driving test was over.
Yeah.
I should have brought a fax machine. Just put it in the back seat,
Oh my God. Oh, but okay, so your test was actually kind of different than mine because I didn't have the seatbelt thing. The guy just buckled when he got in. I did a parallel park. I did a 3-point turn. I had to do a lane change, a stop sign, and a roundabout. And then
where did you do a lane change?
There was like a smaller street, and we were just driving, and he goes, get in the left lane, and I checked, and I merged over, and then he was like, get in the right, and I got over in the right, and then he was like, make a right at this light, and then I went there, and there's like a convenient driveway. I felt so bad for them because I think every driving instructor brings them there for the 3-point turn, and then a parallel park, and then he was like, I forgot what the last part was, but yeah, then he came back and he was like, great work. And then, there's a stop sign. That was the other thing. But yeah, after that, he was like, great. And then signed it off.
Yeah.
It was over in like under 10 minutes. I was like, okay.
More in depth, though. That's more in depth than the New Jersey one.
Oh, interesting.
I guess.
So what are skills that the test doesn't test you on that you guys think you needed in driving? Like, I think that would be really interesting to talk about because
highway driving. Good God. I think once you get the grasp of it, I think highway driving is pretty easy. But I do think for a first-time driver, learning how to like merge and get in and exit can be a little bit tricky because you're at a higher speed. I mean, full disclosure, the first time I ever went on a highway, I was like kind of terrified because I was going super fast. And you've got to like check your blind spot, and then you got all these idiots who are like swerving in and out and that kind of stuff. But then once you've done it a couple times, you get used to it, and you get that sense for when people are going to cut in and when they're going to like merge in and that kind of stuff. But they don't test you that on the driving exam, and I think that's an important one to know because I think that's one where a lot of things can go wrong.
Yeah, that's probably why they don't test it because they the people who do the DMV test don't get paid enough for that. To risk their life like 10 times a day with some teenager.
My dad talked to my driving, because you have to do the 6 driving sessions, I think, before they'll give you the permit. And my dad, I remember the guy pulled up. He was like, "All right, Harris, we're just gonna drive around like in the streets today and stuff." And then my dad goes to the instructor and he's like, "Can you like take him on some highways and get him to lane change? Like, come on, let's do some real stuff in this driving session." And the guy was like, "I guess no," but he went back inside. But he walked out to say, "I really want you to take him on like a highway or something." And the instructor was like, "Yeah, I guess I could do that." And we didn't go on a highway, but we went on a road where the speed limit was higher than like a residential area.
Your dad's trying to get the DMV secret menu like it's In and Out. Give him the surf and turf burger.
Yeah.
You didn't go on a highway then until you got your permit?
No, I went before I got the permit with my parents. Because you have to do the driving with your parents in the passenger seat for a while. And then my dad took me out. But
probationary.
Is that what that's called? When
probationary. But that's what I'm saying. Like, because you don't get that until you take the driver's test. So I'm saying
a written test, right? Or wait,
I did highway driving before the written test.
Wait a minute. Did you get something between the written and the actual test?
You mean the license test?
I don't even remember.
The permit, right?
You do a permit test in Illinois, and I think they give you a piece of paper, and then you can do 50
and that's
hours.
The learner's permit.
The learner's permit, yeah. And then you drive after you've gotten 50 hours that are signed off by your
right. Yep.
So to answer your question,
and then you get probationary after the drive. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Got it.
I didn't do highway until after I had the permit, because the permit was mostly like residential and up to like 60, and then I did highway driving.
Oh yeah, that's right. You're not allowed to do the highway with a permit. Is that what it is?
No, that's not a rule. That was just my progression.
Okay, yeah, I thought you could do as long as somebody was with you.
Yeah, my instructor, I'm certain, took me on the highway.
Not my program. They just were residential through and through.
Yeah.
But I guess stop at like Jewel Osco, pick up some like groceries and stuff.
Yeah, I was like, that was about an hour. That took me an hour to drive down the street. Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah. Like, I took driving classes, and those were really helpful. I feel like that's why. And my dad's a really good driver, and he purposefully had me do situations that were difficult. Like, he had a big truck with a trailer on the back, so I think I had 2 hours of driving on my record, and we went on his boat. He pulled the boat out of the water, and it's like 3 p.m. and we're 2 hours away from home. He's like, "All right, you're driving." I'm like, I barely know how to drive a car. So this truck and trailer is, I think the width of a country road is like 8.5 feet, and this truck and trailer is like 8 feet. So I'm like, this taught me like how to stay straight. Because I'm like looking at the back rear mirrors, the side mirrors, as much as I'm driving, looking out the windshield, because I'm trying to make sure I don't go off the road. And the steering wheel is very fluid. It's not like a car where it feels like you'll just keep going straight. Like, this thing was very sensitive, which was crazy because it's like a huge truck. You'd think that it would be harder to turn, but they made it really easy.
Yeah.
So very good experience, varied experiences make it easier to learn and drive in the future, but nobody's forcing you to do that. It sounds like, Gabe, you also had a good experience with the driving instructor, like teaching us how to do these things. But yeah, the government's not checking that you've done these types of driving.
Yeah.
But it's already super stressful for people to drive. Like, people were like, I feel like the instructor had students who were like pretty much very scared and anxious, and half their job was just making them feel not anxious, and like, practice perfect, so just try and get it good. But you know, like, everybody's at a different level. Seems like the driving test is just the bare minimum of what it takes to operate a vehicle, not even to drive it safely.
Right. I think that's one thing people don't learn is defensive driving techniques, you know?
Yeah.
Like you're saying, keeping an eye on your mirrors and really paying attention to how you're centered in the lane. You know, even stuff like checking blind spots and your mirror as you merge. Because I've ridden with people who don't, check both. And it's like,
terrifying, isn't it? It's terrifying, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, kind of. And it's like, yeah, one of these things in isolation, fine. But I would say a lot of people don't learn like any sort of defensive driving techniques, let alone stuff like how to recover your car if you start losing control, like hydroplaning or in icy situations.
Yeah.
Even I've never had that experience, really. So it's like, yeah, learning that kind of stuff. Yeah, see, I want to go to a driving school and learn like how to recover the car in a situation like that, right?
Yeah. It actually happened like probably a couple of weeks after I got my license, and it snowed, like first snow, no plows had plowed anything. I'm at a stoplight and I noticed that the car is like a little bit slippy when I start to go. I'm like, oh, let me gun it and see if what happens here. And I start sliding and I do the thing. It was, I don't know how they only described it to me, but turning the wheel into the direction that you're sliding and then recovering it and then turning it back. There was a little bit of, I don't know how it was muscle memory, if it's never been practiced, but it was definitely a thing that
like an intuition.
It felt intuitive to me. I'm not sure if that's how it is for everybody, but yeah, it was cool to be in the experience because it makes me feel better. Like, oh, I can handle that. Like going through experiences like that lets you know I can handle these things if they happen. You don't need to go through it once a year. You just know, like, next time it happens, keep it in mind.
Right. So, something that I found like surprisingly valuable, even with the cheap setup I've got, is my, $150 Logitech racing wheel and, whatever racing game you've got, and just driving in different situations in like a virtual environment like that.
Oh, that's fun.
And training the muscle memory virtually to recover. And I think it does build like an intuition, because I did get the opportunity. There was one time it snowed at my college and they didn't plow the parking lot to the science building. And I don't remember if it was like early in the day or what, but I drove over there. And so I just started like sliding my car around the parking lot. And yeah, I kind of already had that, intuition. So even something like that, especially if like for like anxious drivers, if you have a simulator that's like close enough to reality, something far better than my crappy setup, then you could have, these people gain virtual experience before, just to get a feel for it before ever getting behind the wheel of a real car. Maybe like lower some of the anxiety.
It's like a flight school where you do flight simulator hours before you get in the real thing. They just let you drive the boat or fly the Boeing 747 immediately.
They let you fly the Cessna first before any sort of sim stuff. So
I had some friends in Wisconsin. These engineers got together and bought a plane, a very small plane, like it fit 4 people in it. But the amount of work it takes to just do a plane is insane. Like they have like a checklist that they check every single time, and they don't skip anything. And they have it written down. They make sure everything's good, and they have like very rigorous tests. They like there's a thing where they put tape over your goggles, so you can't see out of the windshield. You can only see the instruments on the plane. You're supposed to be able to fly by instrument. If it's foggy out. So there's like, it sounds like we can learn something from flight schools, like the way that they take it very seriously in cases where you will probably not be in good conditions and prepare for the worst. Like most people aren't going to be driving their plane when it's good or bad conditions. But if you ever got in that situation, you should know what to do. I really like sorry, Gabe, you go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I agree. I think that'd be like great to get, people learning how to drive, experience of how to drive in dangerous conditions. but also it's like to some point, like you can't hold people to that high of a standard though. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, like, yeah, because it's like people flying planes are like professionals, and yet we want to allow, I guess
normies.
Anyone yeah, if you want to put it that way, like it's weird. You've got this trade-off, right? I guess is all I'm saying.
Do
Yeah.
you think there's like a desensitization to what you're actually doing when you drive a car? Like you are piloting this heavy piece of metal that can destroy things, and I mean nowadays it's all about like the comfort and the luxury behind it and that kind of stuff. And it's let me change the playlist, and you're like zoning out for 3 seconds, and you're like, oh my god, or it's the why would this guy go faster, and then you just kind of like road rage around him and pass him and stuff. But I feel like I obviously wasn't around when cars first developed and stuff, but I feel like when people did that, they would be way more like cautious. And even like the very first time you get in a car, it can be a little bit scary because you're like, oh, this big thing that I'm now driving, I don't want to hit like the garage or whatever. Do you think that like has something to do with it, where we're just too complacent and it's like too normalized almost?
I think complacency is big thing for sure, especially with how dangerous it is to drive, and the fact that it's like car crash, like okay, like that doesn't even make the news, but a plane crash does.
Yeah. Or I guess the equivalent would be 100 car crashes separately don't, but one plane crash with 100 people in it would.
Yeah. Even though cars are far more dangerous and planes is the safest mode of transportation.
Yeah.
The most dangerous part of any flight is the drive to the airport, right?
Yeah, really though. Yeah.
Yeah. I was having this idea of the whole thing you were saying, like road rage, texting, none of that's going to be fixed by a simulator. But those are the issues, is like how cars are integrated into our everyday lives and the way we're very normalized. It's the whole thing is very normal of like, but even with texting and stuff, like there was stuff before that, putting your makeup on in the car. I guess the three of us wouldn't do that, but the ideas, or like
speak for yourself,
eating and driving, doing anything like that. Some people even read a book while they drive, I've heard.
Yeah.
I read a book and walk, actually. Yeah, or watch a movie. I have watched a movie and driven before. Yeah. It's just because
on the
podcast. you guys pull your badges out. I'm caught. But yeah, people are distracted drivers just because that's how humans are. We don't want to sit in a car and do basically nothing, like something we've done before. So I can see why self-driving is a really big idea, because if you got to use a car to get there and you've done this a million times, like I could basically sleep to get there. Like I could do this in my sleep.
Yeah.
I can see
why
something
unexpected happens.
Yeah, exactly. And that's actually where it's scary, but it would be more, I'm going to say engaging, not fun or interesting, just engaging, because your brain is going to be like, oh shit, what do I do now?
Yeah.
Like your brain's actually going to be thinking of what it should be doing rather than seeing the same tree you've passed every morning.
Yeah.
And
sure.
The idea I was going to bring up again with, you were talking about in the early days with cars, like when they first came out, there was a switch where people were really cautious around it. And then the people who owned cars were really annoyed that there wasn't enough infrastructure for their cars. And like the whole idea of a jaywalker, apparently like calling somebody a jay was like, they're dumb. But that came out in like the 1900s, I think. And that was a term that people brought up to say like, hey, you shouldn't be crossing the street except at the designated crosswalk. But the whole thing was like, that's how people walked in cities before cars were there. Cause you cross where you need to cross. Like there's no reason to have a crosswalk because there's nothing. It's honestly smarter to cross where it's like designated, because that's a safe area with cars and even trains and buses. But like before we had these technologies implemented, humans just acted like humans. And the infrastructure need to be changed to accommodate it. So it's like, I think we have gotten complacent with cars being in our lives, but it's so different compared to like what it was when the cars first came out.
Yeah, and I think there was one takeaway from today's episode. It's that public transportation sucks. We can't fix our infrastructure, and we're doomed. Oh, and the driving test is too easy, and normies are driving on the road, and Tesla fabricates their reports.
I thought we said it. We weren't doomed.
We're doomed.
It's just going to be hard.
Yeah. I think there's good stuff to come out of this, and I'm pretty sure without having cars, I mean, it's like going back to the whole thing I said last podcast about I didn't need to stop eating to know that food tasted good, but like we would have known that cities that feel comfortable to be in, like we still would have figured out what makes it work. But having this complication of cars versus buses and trains and public transport, that does give us a counterpoint to like figure out why are car-centered cities really awkward and uncomfortable to live in compared to ones that have a lot of public transit. So I would still say I wonder if having the whole thing of cars makes it kind of enabled a lot of this research so that we understand our cities better. So the failure of making cities centered around cars in some areas, I wonder if that actually has enabled us to realize, wait, this is probably not great, rather than just doing the same thing we've always done. I wonder if we would have been somewhere different without having cars in the picture.
Yeah. Okay. Well stated, Nick.
Thank you.
But yeah, so we're almost at the end of our time here. So to close the podcast, I have one question for each of you, and that is, today, for free, if you were offered to be given a Tesla with full self-driving on it, and you were given that, would you use it as your daily driver? And by daily driver, I don't mean turn off the full self-driving and use it like a normal car. I mean, as much as possible, everywhere you're trying to go, you turn on that full self-driving beta.
Yeah. Because I do with my current car.
That's what I do right now anyways.
I mean, yeah.
Well, I guess I have a motorcycle and I don't use that. There's other things around it, but let's say for sake of this argument, if it was free to park, because CMU is like $500 for parking permit. So I don't know. But let's say it was free. There's always parking. It's very easy to park there. Would I use it? I probably would, just because. Yeah, but it's more. I would say it's more the idea of the car. I don't have any options. I personally like driving a car because I don't do it all the time. But my commute, even with the car, is not very long. Like I'm fine. It's like stoplights. There's no long highways I've got to drive on. But if I had a car,
it's not an option. Maybe a better way to phrase it would be, it's not an option, and it's always going to be full self-driving unless it disengages because it thinks it crashes in which case you take over.
Yeah, I guess in that case I would use it because it would be more convenient than what I have now. Just slightly. And I'm sure it'd be nice in other situations, but
yeah, I totally would. And it's because and this kind of ties in really nicely, but Nick, when you were saying that Tesla is kind of putting their foot in the water and they're kind of like half measures, how you described it, I actually thought that fit in really nicely with the theme of failing forward, because they're failing a bajillion times, right? And they're trying to break new ground in this area. And to their credit, they've kind of inspired a lot of other people to come on board and do the same thing. But the problem is their failures sometimes involve fatalities and human deaths and that sort of thing. But I think that we are still, I mean, anytime any new tech gets adopted, there's going to be this transition period where it's not quite what Nirvana is, and we're no longer in the past, and we're in this weird middle area. And I think we're seeing the start of that weird middle area. And I think once we figure it out, and once they failed enough times, I think they will eventually succeed. And even though we can't fix all the infrastructure problems, I think we'll be well on our way to getting a nice band-aid on the problem.
So I want to end with a question for you guys. Do you think self-driving cars will ever get to that level 5 point? When I say ever, let's say the next 50 years. Do you think we'll have, I don't know what level 5 is actually, just the point where you can go to sleep while it's driving and it's a thing that's commonly available to people? Like, do you think it's a thing that we're going to engage with, or do you think it's going to fail and people are going to realize that it's not worth investing so much time and energy in?
I think the only way that can work is if, I think the whole problem has to be restated, right? Because trying to get a car to drive like a human is, I think, the worst possible way to go about it, because humans suck at driving. I don't have to look at the stats to know that that's true. So humans are bad at driving, right? But what needs to happen is, I think, all the companies have to collaborate and come up with a way to get all the cars to communicate with each other. Because when you can look at it from that point of view, where you have like a million cars and they all have a different way to go, and it's just a route planning, we've solved the route planning problem in many different forms, many different ways in the past. And when you have it like that, then you can hop in the car, you can say, I need to go to the movie theater tonight, take a nap, and then it'll drive you, and it'll collaborate with the other cars on the road, figure out where it needs to go, do the pedestrian detection, whatever, right? It'll do all the rest of it. But it has to be collaborative. If it keeps being this thing where it's like, oh, Tesla's got its own algorithm, now Mercedes-Benz got its own algorithm, now Honda and Hyundai have their own, it's never going to work, because these algorithms are going to keep literally crashing into each other, no pun intended, although that was pretty good.
Yeah, good job.
That's my 2 cents.
Congratulating yourself on that.
That's my 2 cents on it. Gabe, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I essentially agree with you. And I mean, I think we will effectively get there, particularly because, like, essentially people want to get there. We've essentially already said this is going to happen. And people already have this in their minds that we're going to have vehicles like this someday. And I think that is going to really be a big driving force to effectively make it a reality eventually.
Yeah. I'm a little bit more conservative than you guys. I don't want to give a yes or a no, because I could see it getting there, but the things that would stop it getting there, I would think, are infrastructure, because there's the whole thing of bad lines on the road and neural networks not understanding context very well at the moment. It sounds like NVIDIA has a team, or even several teams, that are helping Tesla and other car companies doing this autonomous driving. So like, there's a lot of just dedicated people to figuring out how can they take this sensor data and make the car drive and understand different things that are happening and making it transparent to the user. Like, it seems like people are making it work. I'm hesitant because, at least at this moment, I feel like machine learning is just it's a little bit of a fad. It's useful, but it's being overused and over relied upon. Like, it's not, I think it could be very good, but it's like, you got to take it with a grain of salt and like really test it. Cause there's not even like there's a committee on talking about how do you quantify uncertainty in physics-based models of different types. And they've written documents about, here are actual tests you can do on your physics model to say this is how certain it is when it gives you a suggestion. But for machine learning, there's nothing like that. There's a committee, but they haven't written anything yet because stuff is changing so quickly. And it's all data-based. It depends on what you're doing. So it's like there's no general guidelines that have been established yet for how do you use these models. So that's why it's very weak ground for neural network machine learning stuff. And maybe the people who are doing this are going to be part of the people who write those standards. How do you implement a model that works in the everyday? And like, how do you make it transparent to the person who's interacting with the model that it's not very sure what's going on? So I don't know if it'll get to the level 3, that level 3 point. Like I'm sure they'll stay on the road. I'm very sure because it's nice features. It's not like it's terrible. Like they can make it better at that level 2 point.
Yeah.
But yeah. Also, the U.S. has to fund more infrastructure stuff. And if the roads keep depleting or getting worse, then like nothing can drive on it. So it's a whole other discussion.
I would just say that machine learning is a tool, right? Just like anything else.
Yeah.
So I think it'll get better over time.
Exactly.
If it doesn't get better, I think something might come along to replace it. But I think it's a good step forward. But like you said, we don't really understand a lot of how it runs, and we can't explain its outputs very well. But I think there'll be pretty good research made there. But the other point I was going to make was you mentioned NVIDIA helping all these companies and stuff, and it actually reminded me of how one of the first things a lot of these companies do is come up with their own mapping algorithm or mapping software, like Google Maps. Apple has their own version of it. I'm sure NVIDIA has their own version. But that's kind of what I'm talking about, where they keep reinventing the wheel a million times in different ways.
Yeah.
And when Apple Maps first came out, it was garbage, right? Telling people to turn off of bridges and go to a place that don't exist and stuff. And it's like, why are we wasting time trying to recreate what someone else has already done? And why don't we just come together, all collaborate, and make one thing? That's how, the Internet of Things domain went. They all tried to do their own thing and then realized they had to collaborate and make one thing, which I think they called Matter or something like that. But So I'm hopeful for the future. I think it'll happen. We'll see how well this podcast ages.
I'm curmudgeon when it comes to self-driving.
Yeah.
But yeah. All right. What do you want to say, Harris?
That's a wrap for today. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
And next week, when we're talking about vegan and vegetarian diets, I'm taking the point on this one. My friend Jonathan should be joining us, along with my sister Heidi, both of whom are vegetarians. And we're going to talk about their diets, what it's been like. I was actually vegetarian and vegan for a while. So I think it's going to be an interesting episode talking about if being vegetarian is the way to go and why it's kind of it has a bad image in the society.